And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As today, the Indiana Hoosiers defeat the Ohio State Buckeyes 69-66 in Assembly Hall. A huge win for Indiana. You know, we all felt so badly after that Michigan State game because Indiana just played so poorly. You know, the good taste that we had in our mouths after the Nebraska game had been replaced by this just nasty, terrible taste after Michigan State. And this game today was a big chance for Indiana to make a statement because a win today pushed Indiana to 2-1 with a road win and a win over a top 25 team. So as bad as things have seemed at times this season, a win today could do so much to affect the trajectory of the rest of the early part of the Big Ten season in a positive way, and that's exactly what Indiana did. You know, up 10 there late, but able to hold on for the three-point victory. Just a really good job by Indiana to come and get a win that, frankly, they should expect to get because it's a home win or a home game, and they were able to do it and take care of business. We're going to break it all down on today's episode of the Assembly Call. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. I will be joined by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. If you have questions, tweet them to us. The hashtag is Assembly Call. You can also go over to the YouTube page and participate in the chat over there. Okay. Let's begin the show as we always do with the banner moment. You know, I was going to start out talking about the play of the bench early in the game because I thought those guys were so huge when Indiana was down 9-2. Remember, the first 4 minutes of this game were horrific. I mean, it looked like the Indiana team against Michigan State was back out playing. And Ohio State jumps out to the 9-2 lead. The bench comes in, does a really good job. Ryan, I know you want to talk about that, so I'm going to leave that for you. And frankly, I was going to change my mind anyway because the banner moment for me is the end of the game. And that may seem strange when the Hoosiers are up 10. They have a little semi-collapse there, but they're still able to hold on. But, you know, what's happened ever since the Penn State game last year is every time Indiana has a lead late and anything goes wrong, sphincters start to tighten all over Assembly Hall. We all get terrified that there's going to be some huge collapse and Indiana's going to lose. And so I think today was a big opportunity for the team. Things started going badly there late to make plays at the end, just do a solid job against the press, not turn the ball over, and close out a win against a good team. And that's exactly what Indiana did. It wasn't pretty, and I have all kinds of gripes about our offense late in games when we have a 1 or 2 possession lead because I think sometimes we play more to lose than we do to win, and we pass up good shots in favor of just running clock, which I don't agree with. But I think there are a lot of positives to take from being able to hold on, making free throws. Yogi had 4 huge free throws late to seal it, you know, coming up with a few defensive stops when we needed them. It was an imperfect ending to the game, but it's exactly what this team needed. And I think the more that we can string together, you know, victories like this late in games where we overcome a few bad things happening and make the plays to win, that helps to push the memories of relatively recent past failures further and further, not only from fans' minds, but most importantly from the players' minds, so that they can have confidence, especially on the road, that they can close out games like this. So for me, that's the banner moment. You know, kudos to Indiana, especially Yogi, who really struggled offensively all day. But when Indiana needed him, he was solid with the ball there late, made his free throws, and helped Indiana close it out. So plenty to talk about. We're going to cover it all. Let's go around the horn now. Andy, give me your bottoms line on today's IU victory.
Well, I actually was probably going to talk about the bench as well, but I'll leave that to Ryan too. I think I'm sure we'll talk more about those guys. But you know, one of the big things we talked about after the game on Monday was how Troy and Hunter would respond. And the responses, as we saw today, were pretty much polar opposites of one another, I would say. So I will choose to talk about the positive one, which goes against my normal negative slant that's taken on the show, and talk about Troy. I mean, I thought he was outstanding from an effort level, from making big plays. I don't feel like there were too many bad decisions he made, although his jumping to pass nearly got us into trouble there toward the end, but Blackman bailed him out a little bit on that 3-point play. But 15 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, a block. The block was that much more impressive because it came as he had made a dunk on one end and got all the way back to the under end to block a shot going back the other way. And I just thought, the kind of activity level and effort that we've seen from him that you've commented on a lot over the course of the season so far that was absent on Monday was back tonight or this afternoon, and I thought he really made a good step forward, and hopefully there aren't more of these let's see how he responds type moments with him, and it just this becomes the norm as it had started to become there, and we see these kinds of performances from him. But I thought he was outstanding. The highlight reel plays are great, and the first one of a few that he made was just incredible to cut through the defense and dunk on Amir Williams. But I thought even more than the flashy plays was just getting to some of the rebounds and loose balls and things like that he did. And I think that those are areas where it's easy to see him use his athleticism on plays like those highlight reel plays, but he's also shown the ability to use that just in other more, I guess, normal situations to track down loose balls, to get rebounds and go up over guys. I thought he responded really well. I'm sure we'll talk about Hunter's follow up to that performance a bit later, but Troy definitely responded well, and here's hoping we don't have to have any more of the how will Troy respond to this type of conversations from here on out.
Yeah, all Big Ten Troy, which we saw today, makes Indiana really tough to beat. All right, now, the long-anticipated comments by Ryan Phillips about Indiana's bench. Go, Ryan.
Yeah, I think today's MVP, I mean, Troy Williams was fantastic. So was James Blackman Jr. in the second half. But I think the MVP was Colin Hartman. I just think his activity level the entire game kept Indiana above water. I mean, he came in off the bench early on, and I thought provided a spark when, like you said, that first 4 minutes was awful, and they were down 9-2. And I thought that he helped out in that. I thought Emmett Holt helped out in that. But I just think that Hartman's activity level, I mean, he had, what do you have, 4 points today? No, 2 points today. 2 points. He also had 2 turnovers. One of them was awful in the backcourt. He just got the ball taken right out of his hands. But he also had 6 rebounds, 3 blocks, and he just generally was doing Colin Hartman things. And I thought that his activity level really kept Indiana in the game. In stretches where they'd struggle, it just seemed he'd come up with a big play, or even if it wasn't a big highlight reel play, it was just a solid play that we needed. And he was doing things like just tipping rebounds out to other guys and things like that. And he's just doing what we've come to expect from him. He's got that sort of ugly old man game that's just really efficient, and he keeps coming up with that and coming up with big plays every game. And I thought he and Emmett Holt today were really the difference in the game.
Yeah, both those guys were great. And here's what I like about both of them. And it seems like kind of a simple thing, but I think it's underrated. Emmett and Colin Hartman are just both, they always seem to be where they're supposed to be. Like they're kind of in the right place at the right time. They're just kind of smart, savvy players that are in a position to make plays when you need them to be. And you need guys like that on teams. Clearly they're not going to be leading scorers, superstar type players. You need those guys too. But you got to surround your Troy Williams and your Yogi Ferrells and your James Blackman Jr.'s with guys like Emmett, Colin Hartman, Robert Johnson today. I thought in the second half made some really smart decisions with the basketball. That kind of balance is what you need to be a good team. Now, before we kind of dive into some numbers, because there's some really interesting numbers when you start looking at today's game, let's talk about James Blackman Jr. because, we've been pretty harsh on him here lately, basically because he hasn't shot, he hasn't played particularly well, and his first half wasn't particularly good today. He only had 2 points, and the first thing that he did in the second half was come out and airball a three-pointer, so it kind of looked like it might be more of the same. But he was terrific from that point on in the second half. He scored 18 total, 16 points in the second half, continued his strong rebounding with 7 rebounds. Only made 1 3-pointer. So he was able to score in other ways. He made free throws. We saw some of his runners. He made some smart attacks on the basket. I thought in the second half, that's what we need to see out of James Blackman Jr. Because, in the first half I commented, he doesn't so much move without the ball. He just kind of drifts, and you're not going to get away from guys. You're not going to get yourself open if you're just kind of drifting, gliding around. And, he still isn't particularly effective when he doesn't have the ball in his hands yet in terms of getting in position to score, but I thought he was more smartly aggressive with the ball in his hands in the second half, and that led to him getting some buckets that Indiana needed. Because, look, we can talk about, all the work that the bench did, and it was extremely important, but in a three-point game, you need every point you can get. And so James Blackman Jr.'s ability to score on a day when Yogi wasn't really locked in offensively and, shots weren't falling for Robert Johnson, Indiana only makes 4 3-pointers, that's huge in Indiana pulling out this 3-point victory. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on him after this strong performance. Ryan, let's go to you first.
Yeah, I think that the thing about Blackman is what was different between the first half and the second half is the second half he started attacking. The first half he just sort of was, like you said, drifting and, shooting bad threes or maybe taking a couple dribbles and just not going up strong. I thought the second half he really made a determined effort to attack the basket, and he wound up getting fouled a lot and going to the line. And he's, an 87% free throw shooter. Those are automatic points, and he has to realize that you don't have to score everything from the field. If you're getting hacked and you're going to the line, those are free points for you. And, those add up, and at the end of the game, you're going to wind up with 20 points. And so I think that early in the game, you could tell Tom Crean was imploring the team to drive, because as Dan Dockich, jackass that he might be, he can be a very smart basketball analyst, was saying if you drive at Ohio State, you can beat them, and they're not very good at defending that. And Crean, you could hear him on the broadcast, Crean yelling to the team to attack, and sometimes they get caught up in that sort of just handing the ball off at the top of the key, going back and forth and side to side. When they started to cut up Ohio State going up and down the floor, Troy Williams was really the first one to start doing it. They really had easy opportunities at the basket, or they were getting fouled. It was one of the two. So I think that Blackman is starting to realize that he doesn't have to play beyond the three-point line to be successful. He can get in there and attack, and that's where he's going to get the majority of his points, I think.
Yeah, Andy, what do you think of James?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the same things. I think there were a couple times that I think Ryan tweeted this out in the first half, and I know I said it about that shot in the second. It's like there were some shots that it felt like he took for the sake of shooting, whether that was because he felt like he needed to or he wanted to. Hadn't shot in a while, wanted to see if he'd get one to go down. I don't know what it was, but they weren't really, in the flow of things. There was a play in the first half where I think it was Holt set a good screen. He got around him, but instead of turning the corner and going to the basket, he kind of flattened out and shot an off-balance three at the top of the key, and he missed. And it sounded like from what the guys on TV were saying that Crean was telling him the same thing: get to the basket. And so it felt like in the second half he got that. I won't say a layup; it was a little bit tougher than a layup, but got a shot inside and kind of saw the ball go through the basket. And as you see, with a lot of shooters, just sometimes it just takes one. Came down and hit a three after that, and then I thought really played well. And I think, on a team that what you don't want to see is on a team that has shot the ball really well from three-point range, starting to feel like, well, this is what we're supposed to do. This is what we are. This is all that we are. And I think with Blackman, to a certain extent, that's all anybody's talked about with him, coming in is like his shooting and how good of a shooter he is and things like that. And I think, whether subconsciously that plays in or I'm just making stuff up. I think there's some validity to, like, you don't have to do that because people think that's what you're best at, or because that might be what the main skill that you're noted for. And so I thought at least in the second half he made an effort and really diversified what he was doing a little bit better and really tried to get to the basket. And if your shots aren't falling from the outside and you're trying to work some things out with your shot, then he can still be effective and score. And I think he has to do that because, as you said about kind of drifting on the offensive end, I think he got to drift on the defensive end as well. So he's got to be able to find ways to impact the game offensively, even if his shot's not falling. And I thought in the second half he figured out ways to do that.
All right, quick pop quiz. Who had the highest plus-minus for Indiana today? Andy, you first. Quick, first impression.
Hartman.
Ryan? Dude, I said quick.
Holt.
Yes, Emmett Holt. Highest plus-minus on the team, it was plus 13. Only 5 points, but 7 boards, 2 blocks, and again, as we mentioned, just kind of in the right place at the right time. I think, look, his performances have been a little up and down. He just burst onto the scene against Pittsburgh. He's kind of disappeared in some games when Hunter's played really well, and other games hasn't gotten as much time, but he was really locked in today, and he seems to be getting more comfortable, more consistently comfortable. And, it just... a game like this really highlights what a steal this guy was for Indiana to get late in the recruiting process. The more I watch him, the more I like him. And I just really think, again, he doesn't have the high ceiling of an NBA-type player, so he's quite likely going to be a 4-year player at Indiana. But I feel like every time I watch him play, I get more and more excited about his future at Indiana, and he's showing that the present is pretty good too. And just, again, it's about positioning. I thought... Hunter played with a little more effort today while he was in there. He was only in there for 8 minutes, and he fouled out, so it wasn't real smart effort. But, Emmett plays hard, and, again, he's in the right position, and he's ready to receive passes in a scoring position. And he doesn't get out of position so poorly on defense that it screws everybody up. And that's what this team needs, and he's providing it, and I have to think we'll start seeing more and more of him moving forward. Ryan, any final thoughts that you wanted to have on Holt? while we're talking about him.
You know who he really reminds me of is someone like DeJuan Blair from
Hmm.
Pittsburgh a few years ago. Was on the Spurs for a while and had injury issues and had to retire. Or I think he retired. I don't know if he's even still in here in the league, but he had been hindered by injuries. But he's just this guy who was undersized post player who was always in the right position, always had great effort. Super long arms, kind of a great wingspan, all that stuff, and just makes the most of what he's got. And that just reminds me of Holt. I mean, he's just a guy who gets the most out of what he's got, and he hasn't even scratched the surface of how good he can be because, with those long arms and that athleticism, he can be a guy who can actually, get the ball in the post and make post moves and score. He just needs to develop that end of his game, and if he does, he'll be a fantastic player. And I agree with you. I think he's a 4-year guy, and I think he'll just be one of those guys that's around for a long time, and everybody just loves him while he's here.
Yeah, and the thing is, we can't. It's not one of those things where we can just talk about his potential for the future. I mean, he's got to play well for this team this year to get where we want to go, and he is. Andy, you wanted to jump in with a few thoughts on him too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing you saw, there were a couple times, like just blockout wise, kind of like textbook position, turned, got into the guy, backed him up, and I think it's partly because, I mean, he's obviously a good athlete. I mean, nobody who's playing at this level of college basketball, isn't. But he's not his athleticism or his game isn't reliant on him being like an elite level athlete. So he does a lot of the little things well that you need to do, whether that's kind of angles and some of the shot blocking things, where the timing and things like that. Where I mean, inevitably we're going to talk about him and Hunter and who needs to start the next game and play and all those things. Hunter is able to make up for some things with his athleticism, but there's other things that just doesn't help. And I think, as Ryan said, Holt really gets the most out of what he has because he's, sound fundamentally. He can catch the ball on the run and on a pick and roll type situation and on the break and be able to convert. And then, always seems to be around the ball and in the right place and does a lot of the little things well. And so I think he's just more reliant on fundamentals and other things like that than just raw athleticism to get things done. And I think that often means he understands better the importance of positioning and things like that.
Yeah, a couple quick numbers, and then I actually have a couple of gripes, coming out of this game, and which I guess seems odd because it is. And Ryan, you mentioned something in our chat. This is a really big win for Indiana. Yes, it is a home win, and we should come to expect home victories. But this is a top 25 team, and again, as bad as things, the roller coaster of this year, preseason, it looks like it could be a disaster, and then things look a little up, and then we have a bad performance and they look down. Dust has settled here. It's January 10th, and we're 2-1 in the conference with a road win and win over a top 25 team. So, as bad as things seem like they could have gotten, they're still pretty good, and that's why this win was so important, just for the trajectory of the rest of this month. So a couple quick numbers, Andy. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
A couple weeks ago we were talking about how Indiana looked like it could be 0-3 to start Big Ten play, with the way that was shaping up. And they're 2-1. They won on the road at Nebraska in what was not a pretty game. They got hammered at Michigan State, and I'd prefer if we just never talk about that again. And then Ohio State is, this is a top 25 team that has a lot of talent, maybe a good matchup for IU because of the lack of size. But, this is a top 25 team, a legit top 25 team in my opinion, and Indiana took them down and really dominated most of that game and had a few hiccups when it came late. But really, I mean, again, that's a big win. It really is, and people shouldn't downplay it. People on Twitter are saying, I kind of feel meh about the win. Well, it didn't finish the way we wanted it to when we got up 10 with 3 minutes left. But at the same time, the fact that we were up 10 with 3 minutes left is a big deal too, considering this is a good team. So I think it's a great win. I really do.
Yeah. And here's some numbers that contributed to that win. Some of them just jump out off the page. Rebounding, Indiana just got hammered on the glass in the game that Ryan would prefer that we not speak of ever again after having 4 straight really good games rebounding. And today, Indiana cleaned up 43% of their misses. Now, they allowed Ohio State to get 36% of their misses, so the work could have been a little bit better on the defensive glass. But still, overall, a nice job by Indiana on the glass. And here's, the number that really jumps off the screen is Indiana's block percentage of 10.7%. Coming into the game, Indiana's block percentage was 7.8, which is 251st in the country. And today, there were some big blocks. I think it was really the timing of the block shots. Emmett had 2 of them. Colin Hartman had 3 of them. So that was big for Indiana, especially since Indiana, again, didn't force a lot of turnovers. They only had 5 turnovers, or Ohio State only had 5 turnovers. And again, Indiana's not getting a lot of steals. But as someone pointed out on Twitter, because I've been mentioning this a lot, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Indiana is sub 200 in steal rate in the country, but so are Virginia and Wisconsin, and those are both 2 really good defensive teams. And overall, this was a solid defensive effort for Indiana. Ohio State scores 1.01 or about 1.02 points per possession. And coming into the game, that's about what Indiana was giving up for the season, but Ohio State was scoring about 1.3 points per possession. So overall, a solid effort there. Andy, any of the other numbers that jump out to you after today's game?
I definitely thought the rebounding was interesting. A lot of Ohio State's numbers are hard to really draw conclusions from coming into the game because their non-conference schedule was so bad. So they had been kind of like middle of the road in terms of allowing offensive rebounds, and I thought that was really key for IU. I thought that was at the very least some of the things that ways that the effort level and the things we talked about with the bench really manifested themselves early was on offensive rebounds, and so I thought that was a really good sign, especially the way they had just gotten hammered on the glass on Monday. So that one was positive. I think the block percentage, I as far as just number, I was surprised by how many they had, and Dikembe Hartman out there patrolling the lane. Then perhaps we just go with that. But I thought that was good. I do think the turnover piece concerns me a bit in terms of not being able to force turnovers, because while the defense has been better in spurts, we've still seen these runs where they can just give up points on 70% of possessions, as we saw, during key stretches against Michigan State and other times during the season. And I think, the team, especially when they're turning the ball over like they were today, I don't know, there's something to be said for me to just generating completely empty possessions from your opponent through turnovers. And yeah, they don't need to be in the top even 100 or the top 50 to do it, but it is concerning that they're not able to force more than 5 in a game like today. Ohio State does protect the ball really well, so I do get that. But it is kind of a concern for me, is because I don't know how well the defense is going to be able to hold up continuously in some of these scenarios. So I think it's definitely something to watch. It's not the end of the world if they don't improve that, but that does concern me going forward, because I do think it's at least symptomatic of some of the defensive issues that the team has.
Here's something that concerns me. Tax Megan, I'm going to have to ask you to stop tweeting Ryan Phillips about his hair and his eyebrows, because we need him focused. Ryan, will you get your head in the game, please? This was a big win for Indiana. Are you with us?
Apologies. Yeah, I'm here. I'm good. I'm locked in.
Okay, so, again, I said I had a couple of gripes. So here are my gripes. I'm going to lay them out there. I want to get your guys' thoughts. Gripe number 1. Indiana, as a team, is a little bit too enamored with the heat check shot. I feel like a lot of times if our guys have a really good offensive possession, they come down the next possession with irrational confidence. 2 guys who seem to do this more than anybody else, at least I can remember him doing it today, or Stan Robinson. He had his one drive that went in, and the next possession he just took it again, and it didn't convert. And I think actually the worst guy about this is Nick Zeisloft. It's like as soon as he makes one, the next time he touches the ball, he's firing it from wherever, no matter if his feet are in line. And so I'm noticing it with that team. A lot of the guys do it, and it prevents us, I think, from going on bigger, more sustained offensive runs. Because, we string together a couple good possessions and then someone takes a bad shot, it's usually a low percentage shot that we miss. And I get, you're hot, you're feeling it, but it still needs to be a good shot. Here's my other one, which is late game, if we're up 1 or 2 possessions, I feel like our offense grinds to a halt and we're so much more concerned with running clock than getting a good shot. And it's not like we're up by 15 points. It's still a 1 or 2 possession game, and I feel like so rarely do we actually get a good shot in that position that we're then we put more pressure on the defense to go down and get a stop, or to have to make the free throws on the next possession. We made them today, but if Yogi doesn't make those free throws, then the empty possessions where we just didn't, it just looked like we were just trying to run the clock, not even try and get a shot, that can really come back to bite us. So, Andy, I'll go to you with those 2 first. I mean, it's hard to gripe after a big win like this, but those are 2 things that they jumped out at me today because I've been seeing them, and that's the kind of stuff that'll lose you a game.
Yeah, the Robinson one was, I mean, as soon as he got the ball right around half court, you knew exactly what was going to happen there, and it played out just as we all probably were yelling at the TV about that. And I think Zaslav is definitely the same way. I mean, he had at least hit a couple before that. You know, Stan had made one ill-advised layup that bounced on the rim 8 times before it finally fell in, and he went right at it again. And I realize that's part of his game in terms of being attacking, and he did that a lot last year. But there's definitely kind of a time and a place for it. I thought Zaslav, I've noticed the same thing over the course of the season, although I don't know that he even shot after the miss that you're talking about, because I think he had made those couple threes and he shot a two right after that, and I'm not sure he shot again because I think his other make had come prior to that in the game. So I do think there's something to be said for that from a continuity standpoint. I think it goes back a little bit to the guys shooting for the sake of shooting and feeling like, oh well, I just made one, I did this, or I need to get a shot here, and can kind of grind things to a halt. I definitely think the end game stuff drives me crazy, and I know that part of it is you want to run the clock and use the clock to your advantage, and shorten the game, so to speak. But for a team that wants to play how IU does offensively, it really is taking it out of any comfort zone that we have on the offensive end. So it turns into either running meaningless dribble handoffs for 20 seconds or somebody standing at half court and dribbling for 25 seconds and then trying to figure things out. I feel like you see it a lot in like the initial possessions of the game. I think today's was a good example where they get the ball off the tip, so everybody's kind of set up defensively. There's no fast break, kind of open floor situation. It's like, oh, let's go run dribble handoffs for 15 seconds and then figure out something to do. And so I felt like that at the end of the game. And while sometimes I think that's valuable, I also think that it gets into a little bit of the playing not to lose mentality. And while I don't necessarily want somebody to go and jack up a three off of one pass with 29 seconds left on the shot clock, I also don't know that we need to get it every time when the one time it's like Hartman's got the ball in his hands at the elbow with 5 seconds left, and it's like, well, he's probably not going to create his own shot here, so what exactly are we trying to do? So I have the same concerns and gripes as you. I mean, I think the only other thing for me besides that was the turnovers today. Yeah, I mean, the late game stuff, probably of the things you mentioned, is the one that drives me crazy the most.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. I think that there's a happy medium that the team needs to find between running clock and running offense. And the problem right now seems to be that nobody wants to attack the hoop. And they get into phases during games where everybody's going at it. Everybody's driving, cutting into the lane, and then, if they don't have anything, kicking it out for an open three or something like that, or just moving the ball. And I think in those late game situations, it's almost like they overthink it. And I don't think it's a coaching thing. I think it's the players just need to get over that lack of a willingness to attack in those situations. It's almost like nobody wants to make a mistake when what you need to do is play how you got yourself there. Yeah, sure, you want to run clock. There's no doubt about that. And so I'm fine with Yogi taking the ball, taking 10 seconds off the clock out in your half court and then getting into the offense or something. That's fine. I don't mind that. What I mind is, like Andy said, pointless dribble handoffs, dribbling into a corner, then dribbling back out, stuff like that. Move the ball, drive into the lane, and work your offense off of that, because that's what you do to get yourself in the lead. And you got to keep doing that late in games. You can't just stop doing what got you there.
Interesting note here from Cyborg J in the YouTube chat. Says, seems like IU dodged a bullet with Anthony Lee. Bad attitude. I don't know about his attitude, but certainly Anthony Lee's first trip to Bloomington after choosing Ohio State over Indiana wasn't all that productive. He actually played the fewest minutes of anybody who played. If you'll remember last year, he transferred from Temple, and one of the three of us wrote a big, long blog post imploring him to come to Indiana and why he should come, because he could help fill the hole down low. But he's really doing nothing for Ohio State, if you wanted the update. He's averaging 3.6 points, playing 11 minutes, and this is after last year for Temple. He averaged 13 points and 8 boards in 31 minutes. So not sure what's going on there, but I guess it's one of those be careful what you wish for because you might get it type things. But it doesn't look like Indiana lost out on a lot by not getting Anthony Lee. Andy, I wanted to talk with you real real quick here just about D'Angelo Russell and what Indiana did defensively to him, because certainly, after scoring 25 points in the first half against Minnesota, he's a scary guy, and he played most of the game, 38 minutes, only 13 points. He was just 3 of 15 from the field, not really making his threes, did have 8 rebounds. So, you can see the potential there. But for the most part, Indiana, especially in the half court, really seemed to harass him and make it tough for him today. Anything stand out in what they did defensively against him?
I feel like Yogi ended up guarding him quite a bit. I know we've talked before about him being one of the better perimeter defenders. I thought he really was able to get into him a little bit. I thought Stan Robinson actually, for all the complaining about his shots and things like that, I thought he did a decent job on him while he was in there, and that's one of the things he's looked to do a lot. Yeah, I mean, Russell seems to me, and I didn't see, I think because I was either watching a different game or something else was going on when they played Minnesota, so I didn't watch any of the first half of that game when he went nuts, but in the second half, in the overtime, he very much kind of felt like the shooting for the sake of shooting that we talked about earlier with some of the IU guys, and he's playing a ton of minutes for Ohio State. I mean, he played 40 against Illinois, 43 of the 45 against Minnesota, and 38 against IU, it looks like. So he's playing a lot of minutes and being counted on to do a lot, but I still think he's a guy who IU at least tried to not let get to the basket and get easy shots and force him to make some shots on the perimeter. Struggle from three was just 1 of 5, and I thought some of those guys just did a good job, really pressuring him outside. And I think he seems to me, at least in games I've watched, particularly against some of the better competition that Ohio State's played, a guy who can be lured into it, or whatever you want to say, taking some bad shots. I thought he took some today.
All right, Ryan, here's another kind of pop quiz question for you. I just want to get your first instinct answer. Who's the most important player on Indiana?
Yogi Ferrell.
Okay, this is why I wanted to ask you, because someone asked us on Twitter, is this Troy's team? And that's, kind of an odd way to phrase it, I think, because, Yogi is clearly the most experienced player. He's the leader on this team. But, it brings up the interesting point of, when Troy plays really well, especially these superlative performances like today, Indiana plays really well. And when he doesn't, Louisville, Michigan State come to mind where he really struggles, Indiana's kind of non-competitive. And I don't know what the answer is. Andy, if you want to chime in with an answer too, but I do know we're really starting to see this trend that when this Troy plays like he did today, this guy who's locked in, he makes Indiana just really, really tough to beat. And as I'm looking at the stats and kind of thinking back about the game, I almost feel like we've undersold his performance a little bit by not talking about it enough. And the other reason why, when you phrase it is this, whose team is this? Troy's got the ball in his hands a lot more now. When he's on the floor, he is initiating the offense a lot. And you think back to last year, that sounds like such a terrifying thing to say. But, man, his ball handling skills have gotten so much better. And, yes, he still gets out of control, but, he's dribbling between his legs and behind his back in traffic, and not gratuitously. He's making effective movements. Like, it's helping him progress the ball toward the hoop, which sometimes guys have pretty handles, but they're just for show. They don't do anything. When Troy is doing some of that fancy stuff, it's out of necessity. And, he just continues to impress. So, I don't know that there's a huge point here other than that. I think it's clear that Indiana needs Yogi. They need Troy. They need James Blackman Jr. They need all of these guys playing well to help make up for the lack of beef inside. But I guess if I had to pick the one guy every game where you're like, okay, you're going to get his top-level performance, I think if we get it from Troy, it puts us in a better position to beat good teams, if the way I phrase that makes sense. I want to get your guys' thoughts on that. Ryan first, and then Andy.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Troy is incredibly important, but if you have to pick one player on this team to bring back, let's say the entire slate is clean, it's Yogi because of what he does on the defensive end. Yeah. I think that I think he's our best defender, and I think that he's a guy who makes things go defensively, and he can really guard any spot on the floor. You don't want him guarding a center, but he's probably our best post defender as far as skill-wise goes. And then offensively, a lot of stuff goes through him. You've seen them try to move the ball out of his hands. I think that we're actually going to start seeing him have the ball in his hands more, because I don't think having him off the ball has really worked that well the last couple weeks. So I think that you're going to start seeing him and not Robert Johnson having the ball in his hands more, and have Robert Johnson run off of stuff. But no, Troy is immensely important, and when he plays well, it puts Indiana on a different level. I completely agree with that. But I think if you take Yogi off this team, you've got serious issues that can't be replaced right now. So that's my reason for saying Yogi. But you're not wrong about Troy. When he plays at his highest level, this team is on a different level, and I agree with that.
Andy, you want to break the tie?
It's a tough call. I guess I would lean toward Troy just because if there's one thing this team has, it's a lot of guards. Now, I'm not saying that those guards can do all the things that Yogi can do, but there is nobody else on this team that can do the things that Troy can. And for a team that's so thin up front that needs extra rebounding, that needs some of these athletic plays and just the versatility that Williams has, I guess I would lean toward him, although I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think the other thing that Troy helps to do, and I think this was one of the things that really got IU out of sorts against Michigan State was, we talk about the effort level, and we talked about that today. Part of it was the effort of the bench and Troy and things like that. I think him, from an effort standpoint, like he can really be the guy that helps set the tone. And that isn't a criticism of Yogi not like giving all out effort, but because I do think he shows it a lot as well. But I think that's one of the things we continue to remark about Williams is, the effort level on both ends and kind of just being all over the place and flying around the court. And I think that's something that he can really help set the tone with, especially with some of the slow starts that we've seen from the team. I think that becomes even more important as we look forward and try to figure out what he needs to do and how the team can get off to a better start.
Just a quick alert. Certainly, we appreciate it if you're watching us live. Currently, Kentucky just scored, so now they're up 5 on Texas A&M. But A&M battling them kind of tough, so hopefully they can somehow complete that and knock the Wildcats from the ranks of the unbeaten. Interesting note on Twitter here. Kyle Anderson, currently a pro for the San Antonio Spurs, tweeted Troy Williams said, "Little bro looking like a pro on ESPN," and Troy tweeted back, "Trying to get there with you, bro." And Troy plays like this. He certainly looked like an NBA player today. So that's what we need. Now it's just a matter of consistency for Troy, and huge for Indiana, huge for himself too, as he looks to make that leap. Kind of tracking here Tom Crean's comments, saying pretty much what you'd expect him to say. Said, in terms of Hunter, said Hunter did fine. There's just too much foul trouble. Credited the crowd for being fantastic, helping the Hoosiers throughout the game. And kind of echoed what we were saying about the contributions of Nick Zeisloft and Colin Hartman, saying, they just provided momentum early when Indiana really needed it. And again, it was a 9-2 game coming out, and I was really disappointed by how Indiana started this game, actually. And, you kind of forget that when it ended well. But that was really huge from those guys. So let's look forward a little bit here. As Ryan said, we talked about this big 3-game stretch for Indiana to start the Big Ten season. And it was one of those, Ken Pom had them predicted to lose all 3 there for a while. It just looked so treacherous. And here Indiana sits at 2-1 after that. So, in a pretty good position. And now Penn State on Tuesday. Then it's at Illinois without Rayvonte Rice on Sunday, and then back home for Maryland. So, you would think, and Maryland obviously has been very, very good this year, but that's a home game for Indiana. So 3 games that, frankly, I go into thinking that we can and should win all 3 of them, just based on how Indiana's played, based on circumstances, before we go on the road at Ohio State and then at Purdue. So this, as important as this previous 3-game stretch was for Indiana, and I think they succeeded, most people's expectations. Now Indiana needs to go take care of business in games that they should take care of business in, starting with Penn State. So, Andy, let's get kind of your quick thoughts on Penn State, and then we're going to start something new, which is we're all going to give our picks for this game. And, looking forward, we're going to give our picks for the next game. We're going to tally them up. We're going to put something out on the blog where we're going to kind of do a little challenge, a little competition, and have everybody do their picks for the IU games. So more on that coming on the blog. But Ryan, while Andy's talking, crunch your numbers and figure out who you think's going to win, because we're going to maybe putting you on the spot again, asking for a prediction. But Andy, some quick thoughts on Penn State as we look ahead.
Yeah, to me, Penn State, of the games that we looked at in this early part of the season, is the one that I don't think anyone would have projected as a loss, and I don't think that's changed now. This is a game that IU has to win. Penn State currently projected to finish next to last in the Big Ten on Pomeroy. They're 0-3 so far. Had a pretty good start to the season from a record standpoint, but really hadn't played anybody outside of beating George Washington. They started out 12-1, but they've gone 0-3 in the Big Ten, losing at Wisconsin, not surprising. Lost at Rutgers and then lost to Michigan. So they'll have had a week off leading up to the game, and I'm sure we all have as many said today, having flashbacks of that game last year. But there's no reason that this is a game IU should lose, particularly at home. So, DJ Newbill's probably the guy that is the best offensive threat for Penn State. He had transferred in, I think last year was his first year there. So, Tim Frazier is actually no longer on Penn State for the first time since the late '90s, so that's exciting that they'll be without him in the game. But definitely a game that IU should win. Certainly one that with this team you don't want to see them take anybody too lightly. How we've seen some of the play to the level of competition type things, but I definitely feel like this is a team that IU should be able to handle on the defensive end, and Penn State's defense really hasn't been great. They're outside of the top 100 in Pomeroy, so have really struggled at putting people on the free throw line. So again, if you look at things for IU to do, definitely want to see them attack and try to draw some fouls. Hopefully, this officiating crew will not be back on Tuesday night. But conceptually,
I was just going to say that. You know?
Conceptually, what was able to happen in terms of drawing fouls, I would like to see that return. I would just like to see the faces who are calling those fouls be a different set of individuals, or at least one of them be different.
No Tim Frazier, no Aaron Kraft, but always Ted Valentine. Always TV Teddy. Even just kind of randomly changing one of his own calls just so he can get some more TV time there. You know,
I have never seen that before. Seen a guy make a call and then say, "Oh no, I was wrong. No, forget it. I blew the whistle for no reason."
The game was almost over. He needed more TV time.
I guess, but I mean, it wasn't like he made a call and went to video and overturned it. He just said, "Oh no, I was just kidding, guys."
You know, there's so many times when Bob Knight unnecessarily intimidated somebody or was kind of a jackass to somebody. But when he went out and walked a circle around Ted Valentine at Assembly Hall, that's one of the greatest moments ever. I wish he'd been there today. Just
completely 150% justified.
Yes.
And I am not somebody who defends a lot of Bob Knight's actions on the court, but that was 100% justified.
This is a great moment when Valentine's over there checking the video, and you just see Chuck Crabb kind of in the corner of the screen just staring at Ted Valentine, and the disdain on his face as Ted Valentine was in front of him was so obvious. Oh, Ted Valentine. Okay, so picks real quick. I mean, this is kind of a layup, I would think, here to start out the picks. Andy, I'm assuming that you're picking Indiana to beat Penn State as we go officially on record here.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Ryan?
So we're just doing a straight pick, no score or anything like that? Just
straight picks. Straight picks only.
Indiana wins.
Indiana wins. Yes, I'm going to go with Indiana as well. And again, we will have the blog post up where you can post in the comments, plus what you can win and all the fun rules and stuff. We have really excited. We have actually 3 new interns working with the show, so we'll introduce them to you over the course of the next few weeks. But very excited about them, and this is actually an idea that one of our interns, all students at Indiana, that he brought to the table, and so I'm excited about it, and I think it'll be fun. And so we'll get that going. With that said, I think we can wrap it up here. We've got an exciting weekend of NFL football coming with some big playoff matchups. Hey, that Kentucky game, it's only a 2-point game now with 2 minutes to go, so we might have a final score update for you here after we're done talking about this game. But let's go to some final thoughts here as Indiana wins against Ohio State. Let's go with Ryan first, then Andy, and then I'll close it out.
You know, we're done with the first week and a half of January, and Indiana's 12-4 and 2-1 in the Big Ten, tied for second place. I think after all the turmoil and everything in the offseason, if anybody told you that, you would take that in a second, especially considering who we've played. Yeah, we got hammered by Michigan State. There's no sugarcoating that. But they went to Nebraska, which has been a house of horrors, and won there and held off a really late run, a really big late run by Nebraska, and just kind of stiff-armed them away. Ohio State definitely fought in this one, but Indiana wound up pulling it out. I mean, those are good signs when a team that's this young and this inexperienced can do that kind of thing. And again, to be sitting at 12-4, yeah, the Eastern Washington loss was bad, but I think the team learned a lot from that. And then you've got losses to Louisville, Georgetown, Michigan State. I mean, those are good teams that we're losing to. So I don't think I think Indiana is way further along than most people thought they would. And anybody who says this wasn't a big win or, oh, well, you know, it was just kind of a meh win is wrong. It's a big win to get Ohio State, who we don't know much about. They may not be a top 25 team. I think they are. But, you know, just to have another ranked team come into Assembly Hall and get sent home with a loss is always a big deal, and I thought that was a big deal today, and it was a big win.
As Chronic Hoosier always says, you rank them, we spank them, right?
Amen.
Andy, some final thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'd echo a lot of what Ryan said. I think this was a game where they'd gotten through these first couple games, and then the Michigan State loss was an ugly one, obviously, but this felt like a game that they really needed to bounce back in, and this was potentially a part where are things going to get away from them a bit? Does that one game start to look like an aberration, or does that become the norm? And so I thought they responded really well today, outside of a pretty horrific start. And hopefully they carry that forward, because this is a case where now you're going in and playing a Penn State team that's better than the majority of the non-conference competition that IU faced. But you'd like to see them be able to jump on them early and really get some guys going. Would love to see Yogi play well in that game and bounce back a little bit after a tough game tonight, although he was one of the only guys, maybe the only guy that played well against Michigan State. So like to see him come back. And the other thing that I'm really interested to see is what happens with the starting center position and whether Pere is really back out there. Crean intimated after the Michigan State game that Holt was right on his heels, and I would say today's game did nothing to solidify Hunter's spot in the starting lineup. So curious to see if that changes and how Hunter might react to that, and how Holt can play in a starting role, and if his effort level and activity level can help him get off to a better start. Because I think the one thing that we're starting to see is that's becoming a bit of a trend in terms of starting slow and having to get back and rebound. So hopeful that can turn around and get a hopefully relatively easy win against Penn State and be able to jump on them early, and at best case maybe see a little Tim Priller by the end of the game.
That is always the best case. Okay, as I begin my final thought, the latest update I have is that it's 53-51 Kentucky over Texas A&M.
Texas A&M just got fouled, so they're going to the line for 2 with 18 seconds left.
Nice. Okay,
I would have jumped out of the screen a minute ago of the video had the 3-pointer gone down and the Texas A&M shot. So luckily I held it together since it was while I was speaking. But we'll see how this goes.
All right, if something phenomenal happens, feel free to interrupt my final thought and to break in with live coverage of Kentucky, Texas A&M. And again, I echo what you guys say. This is a big win, and I think today these last couple games have been an important lesson with this year's team, and I think it will help us all moving forward to maintain our sanity. That look, this is a good team. Okay, Indiana's 12-4. We're 2-1 in the conference. And this is a good team that we have on our hands. And I think any thoughts that this season was going to devolve into kind of what last season was, I think we can put those to bed. Now, we don't know what the ceiling of this team is, and I think that the loss at Michigan State, probably lowered for me what I think the ceiling can be. But, I'm really impressed that the team was able to come back today, and even after a slow start today, rebound, kind of get fed up with itself and decide, hey, playing good basketball isn't that hard. You play hard. You do fundamental things like rebound. You get smarter shots. And for the most part, Indiana did that to win this game. And I liked seeing that from this team. And so, I think it's important. It's hard not to get too high, too low on a game-by-game basis. But I would just say, it looks like the game's going to overtime. Is that overtime? Kentucky, Texas A&M? Maybe a nod from one of you guys?
Well, I'm not sure. Now there's 0.1 seconds on the clock, and I'm not really sure why. I don't think anybody was close enough to actually foul. So now I have no idea what's going on. So we'll see. Maybe they're saying Kentucky called the timeout. I have no idea.
Well.
Keep going. I'll give an update when you're done while we try to sort this out.
By the time most people listen to this,
Valentine can only be in one place to sort these things out, so he's not there. So we're going to have to rely on this set of zebras to sort through what's going to happen.
Dang it. So really my final thought is this. Look, there's going to be another bad moment or two in this season. It's just going to happen. Either Indiana's going to have just kind of a game you'd like to forget, like against Michigan State, or they're going to lose against a team that they should beat because of a bad shooting night or another team playing really well. So just get mentally prepared for that, but don't let it cloud your entire view of this team. This is a good basketball team. This is a team that's going to compete for an NCAA tournament, that is going to compete for an upper division finish in the Big Ten. And I know that's a little lower than what we want it to be, but it's certainly better than what we thought at the beginning of the season, and the team is growing and getting better. And I think this game showed that, and a 2-1 start in the Big Ten season shows that. If you just look at the Michigan State game, I know things look pretty bleak, but look at the entire 120 minutes they've played in Big Ten play so far, and I think there's a lot more to be encouraged about than to be discouraged about. So just get yourself mentally prepared for another bad moment. It's going to happen, but there's going to be a lot more of the good moments, and I think this team can do a lot of good things. So, let's stay supportive, let's stay excited, and let's just enjoy the ride here with this season, because I think it's going to be ultimately a good one. All right, everybody, thank you for watching the show live. We always appreciate it. Thank you if you listen on the podcast. Make sure you go to assemblycall.com/subscribe and get on our email list, because you don't want to miss the subscriber-only content that we send out. I think our email list has now quintupled since the start of the season, because the numbers just keep going up and up and up. And there's a good reason for that, because we put a lot of time into giving you some good post-game analysis and to sending you out some really good content there that we only give to subscribers. So make sure you get on that. And with that said, everybody go. Let's go find out if Kentucky loses, and enjoy the weekend of NFL football. And we will be back Tuesday. The game's Tuesday, right? Yeah, I'm actually going to be traveling, so I will be watching and recording that show from a hotel room, so you won't get this backdrop. But I'll definitely be there for that game. I may be watching it on a delay, so I might not live tweet quite as much as I normally do, but I'll be watching. We'll have a show like we always do, so we will look for you then. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Way to go, Hoosiers. Big win today. We'll talk to you on Tuesday.